Welcome back to Galaxy Recaps. Today we'll be diving into an action thriller film titled The Old Guard. Enjoy the recap. The movie begins with Booker, who meets Andy on the street to discuss a potential mission in South Sudan, a hostage rescue. He tells her that James Copley, a former CIA operative now freelancing, is behind the request. Andy hesitates, expressing her growing disillusionment with the world. Convinced it's no longer worth saving, Booker urges her to at least return to the hotel and discuss it with Nikki and Joe. At the hotel, the reunion is warm. It's been a while since the team was last together. While the others seem ready to take on the mission, Andy remains skeptical, voicing her distrust of Copley. Despite her doubts, the team convinces her to meet with him alongside Booker to hear him out. Seated at a small cafe table, Andy and Booker listen as Copley lays out the situation. Nikki and Joe watch from the hotel window, keeping a watchful eye. Copley explains how their skills could make a difference. Andy's skepticism lingers, but ultimately, she agrees to the job. When she questions Copley about leaving the CIA, he confides that he stepped away when his wife fell ill. After her death, he couldn't bring himself to return. The team boards a helicopter to South Sudan, staking out the hostage site. Under the cover of night, they silently eliminate the guards and breach the bunker. But inside they find no hostages, only surveillance cameras glaring down from the ceiling. Andy's instincts prove right. They've walked into a trap. A squad of armed soldiers floods the room, opening fire and cutting them down. Blood pools around their bodies as the soldiers assume the fight is over. But it isn't. Moments later, the team's wounds rapidly heal. Bullets are expelled from their bodies as they rise and swiftly dispatch the unsuspecting soldiers. Copley watches the entire ordeal unfold. Afterward, the crew buries their bloody clothes in the sand and boards a train. Andy makes the call. They need to find and eliminate Copley before their secret is exposed. Meanwhile, in Afghanistan, Niles, a U.S. soldier, is tasked with investigating a potential hostage situation. Approaching a group of women, she's wordlessly directed toward a building. Inside, she confronts an enemy combatant, shooting him in the chest. As she inspects the body, he suddenly retaliates, slashing her throat. Her comrade cradles her as she bleeds out. Back on the train, Andy and the crew experience vivid dreams of Niles' death, while Niles herself dreams of the crew. Andy recognizes the meaning. There's another immortal like them out there. Frustrated, she realizes that just as she hoped to deal with Copley and disappear, a new member has emerged, pulling them back into the cycle once again. The crew convinces Andy that they need to track down Niles and bring her into the fold. Andy insists she'll handle it alone and meet them later in Paris. Meanwhile, the rest of the team focuses on hunting down Copley. Back at her base, Niles senses her comrades' unease. When they check on her, she notices their discomfort. There's not even a scar where her fatal wound once was. Her miraculous recovery raises alarms, and soon she's informed she'll be transferred to Germany for further testing. Returning to her tent, Niles discovers her belongings already packed by her unit. In England, Merrick delivers a compelling presentation to potential investors, pitching his vision for stem cell research that could eradicate disease and extend human life. Afterward, he meets with Copley and his team, discussing Andy and her crew. Copley shares footage of their miraculous regeneration, but Merrick remains unimpressed. He demands irrefutable proof, convinced mere video evidence won't suffice. He orders Copley to capture the Immortals and bring them to him. While Niles waits for the helicopter that will take her to Germany, Andy intervenes. She abducts Niles, who later awakens in the trunk of an army vehicle hurtling down a desolate road. Panicked, Niles kicks the trunk open and tumbles onto the pavement. Andy calmly halts the vehicle, retrieves her, and continues driving. When Niles attempts to flee again, Andy shoots her in the head. Moments later, Niles revives, stunned. Andy informs her that if she wants answers, she'll need to cooperate. The two board a plane used for smuggling drugs bound for Paris. As the flight progresses, Niles grows increasingly frustrated with Andy's cryptic explanations. Once Andy falls asleep, Niles takes control, binding Andy to her chair and forcing the pilot to turn the plane around at gunpoint. Andy calmly awakens and instructs the pilot in Russian to pretend he's dead. As the pilot feigns unconsciousness, Andy disarms Niles, and after a tense struggle, manages to subdue her. By the end of the confrontation, Niles begrudgingly agrees to continue the journey to Paris. Upon arriving, they regroup with the others in an abandoned church. Over dinner, the crew shares stories of their pasts. Booker reveals he became immortal in the 18th century, while Nikki and Joe recount meeting during the Crusades in the 12th century. Once enemies, now inseparable. Andy, the eldest, admits she no longer remembers her exact age. As the night winds down, the team retires to rest, but Andy remains vigilant, sitting alone in the darkened living room, silently keeping watch. In the dead of night, Niles jolts awake, her nightmare echoing through the old church and rousing the rest of the crew. Shaken, she describes a vision of a woman trapped in an iron coffin, drowning endlessly in the sea. The crew listens solemnly, recognizing the figure in her dream. Queen, another immortal who once fought alongside Andy, they recount the tragic tale. Long ago, while rescuing women accused of witchcraft, Andy and Queen were captured and branded as witches themselves. Their inability to die only fueled the villagers' fears. Desperate to rid themselves of the two women, the townspeople separated them. Queen's fate was sealed in an iron coffin, which was cast into the ocean, condemning her to an eternity of drowning and revival. As Niles processes the story, the crew explains that immortality is not absolute. Eventually, after centuries of survival, some immortals' wounds simply stop healing, signaling their time has finally come. Later, under the night sky, Andy and Niles talk privately. They reflect on the weight of their existence, the loved ones they've lost, and the loneliness immortality forces upon them. Their quiet moment is interrupted by the sound of soldiers outside. Copley has tracked them down. Andy swiftly deals with the intruders, while Copley observes from a surveillance van nearby. Returning to the church, Andy finds Joe and Nikki missing. Booker lies gravely injured, recovering slowly from a grenade blast. Niles stays with Booker as Andy finishes off the remaining soldiers. Once the threat is neutralized, they quickly pack their things and relocate to another safe house. Meanwhile, Joe and Nikki regain consciousness in the back of a military van surrounded by soldiers. The men taunt them for their relationship, restraining them when they try to comfort each other. Upon arrival in England, the van doors open, but inside the soldiers lie dead. Despite being handcuffed, Joe and Nikki have eliminated everyone. They are handed over to Merrick, who coldly explains his intentions. He plans to exploit their immortality for stem cell research, willing to subject them to endless experiments and suffering in the pursuit of extending human life. His cruelty knows no bounds. He demands results, no matter the cost. Joe and Nikki are taken to the lab, and Merrick orders Copley to bring him Andy and Booker next. Andy, Booker, and Niles find temporary refuge in an abandoned mine. While tending to her wounds, Andy realizes something unsettling. Her injuries aren't healing. Quietly, she steps away from the others. Booker confides in Niles, describing the agony of outliving every loved one, watching them grow old and die, powerless to stop it. Elsewhere, Andy visits a small pharmacy purchasing medical supplies. The cashier notices her injuries and offers to help. In the privacy of a back room, the woman carefully dresses Andy's wounds. When Andy questions why she's so willing to help without asking questions, the woman simply replies, "Kindness should be paid forward." As Andy returns to the car, she begins to grasp the reality she has long avoided. Her immortality may be fading. Back in Merrick's lab, Joe and Nikki are restrained in medical chairs. Copley pleads with Merrick, insisting he already has more than enough data from the samples taken. There's no need to keep the two imprisoned. But Merrick refuses to relent. His obsession blinds him to reason. Joe and Nikki will remain his prisoners until he gets the answers he craves. In the lab, Nikki calmly tells the nurse tending to him that the experiments are pointless. He explains this isn't the first time someone has tried to harness their immortality under the guise of helping humanity, and it has never worked. Meanwhile, Niles awakens from another unsettling dream. Stepping outside for air, she finds Andy sitting alone, scrolling through her phone. They talk in hushed tones about the families they've left behind and the burden of immortality. Their bond deepens as they share the pain of outliving loved ones. Soon after, Booker approaches with news. He's located a potential lead on Copley's whereabouts. The three set out immediately. Upon arrival, they park outside the fenced perimeter of Copley's facility, quietly preparing for the infiltration. Andy instructs Booker to scout ahead, but Niles hesitates. She confesses she can't continue living this life, unable to bear the weight of killing more people. She longs to return to her family and spend whatever time she has left with them. Understanding, Andy gives her the keys and a set of weapons, directing her toward the nearest train station. As Niles departs, Andy enters the building with Booker. Upstairs, they confront Copley, cornering him at gunpoint. But the situation takes a sudden turn. Booker unexpectedly shoots Andy in the side, incapacitating her. As she collapses, he restrains her, confessing the truth. He orchestrated the betrayal, delivering them to Copley and Merrick in hopes that Merrick's experiments might uncover a way to end their immortality. Booker admits he's tired of the endless cycle of loss and loneliness. However, as Booker watches Andy's wound bleed without healing, panic begins to set in. Guards flood the room, taking Andy and Booker into custody. Copley protests, his concern growing as he realizes Andy may not survive whatever Merrick has planned. Merrick, unmoved by the revelation, orders the guards to proceed, indifferent to the possibility of Andy's death. Andy and Booker are brought into the same testing room where Joe and Nikki remain restrained. As Merrick prepares for further experiments, Copley confronts him directly. If Andy's immortality is gone, this isn't research, it's murder. Merrick dismisses his concerns, forcing Copley out of the lab. With Andy now at his mercy, Merrick's obsession intensifies. Determined to extract whatever secrets he can before it's too late, he begins the dangerous procedures, hoping to keep Andy alive just long enough to unlock the mysteries of her existence. As Niles drives away, doubt gnaws at her. Unable to abandon Andy and the others, she turns around and heads straight back to Merrick's facility. Upon arrival, she tracks down Copley, who reveals the full scope of the situation. He admits he spent years studying Andy and her crew, compiling evidence of the countless times they've shaped history for the better. Copley confesses he initially believed capturing them for research would serve humanity, but now realizes he was wrong. Their freedom is worth far more to the world. Moved by his change of heart, Niles persuades Copley to help her. He hands over an access code and guides her to the area where Merrick holds the others. As Niles fights her way through Merrick's security forces, word quickly spreads. She's immortal too. Eventually, she locates the holding area and frees Andy, Joe, and Nikki. Booker's betrayal lingers in the air, fueling Joe and Nikki's anger. Andy, exhausted and disillusioned, refuses to keep fighting. But Niles refuses to let her give up, reminding Andy of the promises she made and the lives she still needs to protect. Reluctantly, Andy regains her resolve. Niles arms the group, and together they storm through the facility, cutting down Merrick's guards with precision. Despite her mortality, Andy fights fiercely alongside the others, proving she's still a force to be reckoned with. On reaching Merrick's office, they find it empty. The only clue, the elevator descending. Joe and Nikki pursue it, leaving Niles and Andy behind, but the elevator was a decoy. Merrick steps out from the shadows, gun aimed at Andy. Drawing from Andy's own lessons, Niles mirrors the trick Andy once played on her. Andy collapses, feigning death long enough for Niles to charge Merrick. They crash through a window, plummeting several stories before smashing onto the roof of a car. Joe and Nikki rush to Niles, pulling her from the wreckage. Andy soon joins them, standing silently over Merrick's lifeless body. With the battle over, the crew departs, leaving Merrick behind. Later, the team gathers over lunch, while Booker waits alone outside, awaiting judgment. The betrayal cannot be ignored. As the crew deliberates his fate, Niles steps out to console him. Booker acknowledges her strength and assures her she'll fit in well with the team. On the beach, Andy delivers the final verdict. Booker's punishment, a century of isolation from the team. With Andy's mortality looming, it's likely they'll never see each other again. Though painful, the decision is final. In the aftermath, the crew confronts Copley one last time. They demand he destroy all evidence of their existence and ensure their secret remains buried. But instead of parting ways, they offer him a new mission, to help them change the world from behind the scenes. Copley accepts, setting the stage for the crew's next chapter. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.